Welcome back to Calvary Life. This is the podcast for the membership of Calvary Baptist Church and anybody else out there that's interested in local church life. And I'm Charles Uptain.
Hey, I'm Paul Thompson.
Hey, I'm Dan Hinkersley.
Yeah, we have Pastor Dan with us today. So we thought we would have a discussion today on open classes specifically, and also life groups, just because they sometimes go at the same time as each other. And we are 1 year in to the open class structure that we started last March. So just want to kind of have a conversation with our discipleship pastor and also senior pastor about how those are going, what we think are wins in that, and how things we've changed a little bit from last March, and just a basic conversation about open classes. So, Paul, if you want to start us off.
If there's somebody listening that's not a Calvary person, you're wondering how this benefits you or what this has to do with you, I want you to consider, listen to what we've got to say a little bit about our open class structure and consider the model that we're talking about here. And this was influenced to us by the model that we found at Capitol Hill Baptist Church, where Mark Devers pastor when we did our 9 Marks weekender there, a model they call core seminars, which they don't have life groups exactly like we do, but they have a huge emphasis in these core seminars. And so part of our aim, I guess a year and a half ago, a little bit more. Charles, how long ago was that we were there?
It was September that year, so about a year and a half.
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago we're there, and we started looking at how can we implement a version of this at Calvary. So that's where the impetus came from, and so you can do some research on that if you're pastoring another church or you attend another church about what that looks like. But what we're talking about here is our model and what we've done here. Let me start here. Let me talk a little bit about some of the wins, and you guys jump in with what you think some of the wins are. I would say one of the big wins that would be most obvious is we have our people engaged in and discussing, not just in the open classes, but afterwards, just good exchange and conversations and emails and people asking for things to read to get more information, really engaging in just critical theology. You know, we've gone through a couple series now of systematic theology, biblical theology, overview. Now we've completed a couple of times of New Testament, or we're about to complete New Testament the second time, and Old Testament. I think these critical components of just foundational kind of things, for those people who have attended, I think they've really benefited from that, seeing how the pieces fit together more, understanding concepts they haven't explored more. You know, we hit some pretty weighty things in systematic theology, and biblical theology is telling you how the whole story fits together, and so I think that part has been a real win. What are you guys hearing that people have enjoyed or profited from?
I think another win would be our people are getting mixed up a little bit. In other words, if you're in a life group, same life group for 10, 15 years, now you go to an open class, you're with new people, different people of all ages. And so I think in a good way, open classes have kind of mixed our people up a little bit because we're such a big church. If all you do is go to your life group.
We're huge.
Yeah. So I think in a positive way, it's gotten our people to rub shoulders with people they don't normally get to do that with.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was really one of the main, if there's 4 or 5 purposes we put to open classes to begin with, I guess the itch we were trying to scratch, one of those was our people getting outside of the life group model of going to life group and then going to church and sitting with the same people at church normally just because we're creatures of habit, and being able to leave out of there and not realizing other people that are church members. We really have pushed this idea, which is not our idea, of the church as being a family. And so how can you be a family if you don't know your family members? And so Sunday night has pushed that, and then I think also open classes and the way that it allows us to change every 3 months has helped us with that the same way.
I think another benefit has been not just the foundational doctrine stuff and biblical building blocks, knowing even if it's just a one-session study on each book of the Bible, understanding where does that fit in the bigger picture and what's that book about, that sort of thing. I think some of the practical kind of classes we've done have really been helpful to some folks because, like we talked about a year and a half ago, it's hard to squeeze in a marriage series every year or a parenting series or something on finances or discipleship or purity. But I think those people who've been in those classes, like right now we're wrapping up in this quarter we're in, dating and singleness, parenting, marriage, and those kind of things have been happening. I think that's been really helpful for people too. That's just allows us to get some stuff out there that we think is good and beneficial. And we're tweaking some of that as we move forward. But I think that I've gotten good feedback from people on those classes.
Yeah, we really David Glover and I are finishing up the marriage class on Sunday mornings, and I mean it's been really good to be with couples that we normally wouldn't be around. We've had, we probably have had around 20 people or so each week, and it's just, good conversations that we're able to have. It is a lecture based, as in, the teacher, me or David, probably teaches for 30 minutes, but then we have opportunities to also have some conversations, and they've really stepped up the game this past week. We had a really good conversation on challenges in marriage, stresses in marriage, and I think it was really helpful for the group. And I think we'll come out better as a church, as being family members, out of classes like that.
What do you think some of the challenges have been? Like, what have we learned this year? What do you guys think? What are some takeaways that you have, or some feedback you're getting? I think it's been mostly wins, but there have probably been some losses along the way too, or some lessons learned. What do you think some of those are?
The biggest one in my mind is just, I think the level of accountability has dropped a little bit. For the ones who are in a life group and say, I'm going to go to an open class, and so the life group leader assumes you're in an open class, but then you don't go to an open class. And so I think because of human nature, people know if they're not going to be accountable to be somewhere, they just probably won't be anywhere.
Yeah, and our whole sort of, for lack of a better term, scorekeeping method, not really score, but we don't register individual attendance in worship service. The only way we know exactly who's here is small group roles, that sort of thing. So yeah, we lose some of that, and we've seen some people fall through the cracks. If that's you, if you're listening, then don't use that as an opportunity to disengage. So yeah, I think there's been some disengagement there. What else?
Well, I think we have. I think we've seen that culture a lot of times, borrowing phrases from the business world, kind of eats our strategy sometimes for breakfast. And so the things that we've tried to do when it comes to open classes of getting people outside of their norm, which takes a little bit of inconvenience on people, and it makes people a little nervous to sit around with people they don't know. Some of that comfortability is gone. Sometimes they snap back to what they're used to. And so we've kind of seen some of that. I think one of the main things that we really wanted to do with open classes was have that joint group effort at the very beginning of our time, where we stand around, drink a cup of coffee, see everybody, say hello, then give quick announcements and go to class. And I think especially lately, we've seen more people taking the opportunity just to head on upstairs to the classroom and forgoing that opening time of trying to just get to know each other or say hello to new people. And so, I think it's hard to keep that momentum of no, we need to do this because this is important. And so I think that's been a negative.
Yeah, let me reiterate that a little bit. There's really two challenges I want to make, particularly to our church. If you're listening to this, and if this is you, just take this as an encouraging challenge, not necessarily a rebuke, but a helpful encouragement. One is that component. When we first launched these open classes, we were real clear. We wanted several things to happen. One was conveying really good and helpful and necessary content that we don't have other means to do so. We don't have other good delivery vehicles for. But the other was this, Dan, you mentioned it first, and Charles, you're talking about the specific of it, was how do we get our people out of the little cul-de-sacs they're in into engaging the whole body, even if it's just casually, informally, like let's all get together, hang out a little bit, then go into our different classes and everything. So if you're one of those folks who's just abandoned that and gone back to the old model of just the group is going to meet and you go sit in that room on Wednesday night or Sunday morning, please help us re-engage. That was really a big part of the purpose of this, is we want people to meet new people. We want you to be sitting beside new people in classes and hearing things that way. And the second challenge I would give to our folks, and this does challenge our culture a little bit, and it challenges our understanding of how we do things, but I really want you to embrace this. I want you to understand why we're doing it and why it's important, and that you would embrace this, is one of the rationales for open classes was for us, to develop and train up new teachers, because how else are we going to do that? I mean, where else are we going to do that? So often in our particular church culture, some of our life group leaders have been life group leaders for decades.
Yeah.
They're not. There's no replacement for them. We can talk about substitutes all you want, but there's a big difference in substituting 2 or 3 times a year and leading a class. And as far as preaching goes, I tend to take most of those, and I've got eager staff that also wants to preach, and so they fill in some spots. There are only so many spots there, and plus, you're not typically going to try to develop someone new. You're not going to debut people. Hey, I've never taught before. Here, preach a sermon.
Right.
What platform do we have to train and develop? So what I'm saying is, if you're a church member listening, please be encouraging of, supportive of, and even, if need be, patient with new teachers. And I say this with no ego in this. I know there's a preference sometimes for the teacher or preacher that you know. So sometimes there'll be a tendency you're going to come to my class because you know how I teach or what I'm going to be teaching, or you're comfortable with that, or you like that already, or maybe somebody on staff that you really identify with, or they teach well and you know that already because you've been with them before. But really, just please don't make your decision on participating in an open class based on the name that you see teaching the class, because we're intentionally trying to mix that up, bring new people on board, train up new people, share that teaching load a little bit, that sort of thing. So those would be kind of the two big challenges I would have.
Yeah, and I would say with that, because of how the open class is structured, that each of these classes has a manuscript, so to speak. We don't expect our teachers, and I know you don't and I don't, and we don't read them. It's not like we're reading the manuscript, but it does give us the area we're headed in, and probably I would say out of the document itself, probably 75 to 80% of what is there is what we say. And so with that, I think it gives the new teacher some confidence in what they're teaching, but also from the person who's listening, you can be confident that you're getting good stuff, even if it's a new teacher, because they're not starting from ground zero with what they're providing you. So I hope that helps the open class structure be a place where teachers can be trained, and we can be trained to listen as well, because it's going to be good material. Of course, it gets better with time, the more time you give it, like anything else, but I think it's good material either way.
Yeah, the content's solid. I mean, we're all learning and growing in communication ability and engagement, that sort of thing. But yeah, at least that baseline is solid. Dan, talk a little bit about maybe how things have evolved a little bit for us, like in terms of where these classes are being placed. It's, like now we're putting a little bigger emphasis on Wednesday nights for open classes, but still Sunday morning. Talk a little bit about kind of how we've adjusted course in this first year.
Yeah. I'll back up a little bit and mention another challenge, I think, is, for so many years we pushed 3 circles. If you join Calvary Baptist Church, we expect you to come to corporate worship, go to life group, get involved in life and life discipleship. So now when we introduce open classes, this is kind of a new component. There's been a little bit of confusion of, okay, if on a Sunday morning, do I do life group or open class? And so I want people to know that it's okay to do an open class on a Sunday morning. And I think there's a sense of you default back to what like Charles was saying. But I think it's okay if for 12 weeks you choose to do an open class either individually or as an entire life group. And so that's okay. That's official from the discipleship pastor.
And you can maintain your connections with each other. You can maintain that sense of community. You can do things after church on Sunday night. You keep your prayer emails going, your texting, and whatever you do to maintain community, or your other time get-togethers, that sort of thing, discussions after. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. And like someone said to me, I think, I won't say they were joking, maybe not 100% serious, but at least half serious. Those open classes killed my life group. How do we respond to that? That certainly wasn't our intention. We weren't trying to just take one away and put this one in. But how do we answer that? That what we were trying to do is offer this, but you can still maintain this.
Yeah, I think we need to clarify what we're aiming for in a life group versus what the purpose of an open class is. And of course, I'll speak for life groups. The goal of a life group is, one, to be small, 10, 12 people, 15 at the most. I think most of ours fall within that category. And the goal of a life group is, we're sermon-based, so basically whatever Pastor Paul teaches the following Sunday, we're discussing it. And the goal for the teacher is not to teach the text again, but to actually talk about specific life application. And so life group is focused on life application. It's all those one another's, pray for one another, encourage one another, all those one another's. But the goal for life group leader is not to reteach the text, but to facilitate discussion based on the text, okay? And so theoretically,
and they may have to clean up some messes. If I said something,
when you teach heresy, they got to correct
or something, that, Or if there are questions, that's a good place to say, well, what about this? Or how do we understand that? That's a great place to hash those things out.
Yeah, and so I think sometimes life group leaders feel undue pressure of teaching the text, when really we just want you to facilitate a good discussion on the text, get people involved, that sort of thing. Whereas, life groups are discussion-based and open classes are lecture-based. There's specific content we want you to get in an open class. So 2 different things. It's not either or. I think both and is the goal. But again, going back to your original question, on Sunday mornings we found our people basically going, a lot of them back to life groups. And so we've kind of, I think this coming semester we'll have 2 open classes Sunday mornings, and most of them will be on Wednesday nights. And so I think long-term a challenge is figuring out the best place for open classes and, where they can best benefit our people to where you're getting open class, and life group.
Yeah, and I would say with that, back to what you mentioned about life group. So, and we've had these discussions really and truly, if we have folks who really want to teach, and they're life group teachers, we really would you encourage them to hey, maybe open class teaching is more in line with you than
Yeah, I would say to any life group leader who believes they have the gift of teaching, try an open class. I'll give you a manuscript. You can pick a subject, give you a manuscript. You can do that in your life group if you want to. But again, the goal long term is to have our gifted teachers teaching in open class format. And if you're a life group leader, you don't have to have the gift of teaching. You just need to be faithful and be willing to facilitate a lesson based on the text that we're studying.
Man, I'm getting all kinds of chills over here listening to this. It's exciting. What about you, Justin? It's like, boom, play some music. No, I hope that's resonating with people. And, to think about it, like Charles, you've been a life group leader with couples predominantly. And, for instance, that would be an example. Okay, so now we're doing this series on marriage. We've had some people in your life group talking about, hey, when can we do something in life group about marriage? Well, let's not reinvent the wheel, or let's not overlap something that's already being offered. How about our life group for this period, for this quarter, whatever? Let's all go together. Let's do the marriage one, and then we can find some times to discuss it. Or we're going to get together at so and so's house next Sunday night. Whatever, however you play that out. But it's just a good opportunity to do that. Or you individually, you might say, man, I don't know anything about X subject or that issue. I really need to study up on that. How can you do that? Well, for a season, take an open class. And again, what we're trying to do, just so you guys understand, they're listening, kind of the format on this, we're trying to do this in a way where, say, if your commitment to your life group really precludes you from taking, say, a 12-week out or a 24-week out for one of the long ones like Systematic Theology Parts 1 and 2, we're going to be alternating. So sometimes that'll be on Sunday morning, sometimes on Wednesday nights. So you can pick and you can work out what works best for you. And I know, Dan, you talked about the 3 circles. Part of the challenge to kind of the new format or the new options is we've got a lot of groups that are meeting on campus on Wednesday nights, for instance. We've got a lot of D groups meeting, small group discipleship groups, same-sex discipleship groups meeting. Sometimes you just got to choose this season of life and where you are personally and spiritually, what's going to best serve your spiritual growth and development, what's going to best help you be a good disciple and be a disciple maker. And for that season, it may be to stay in that D group, but also it may be to be in this class on purity or this class on marriage or this class on biblical theology, so whatever that might be, or Old Testament, New Testament, that sort of thing. Let's talk about what's coming up, because this begins our new quarter of open classes begins 1st of March. So let's talk a little bit about what's on the docket.
Well, I'm excited about my class. I don't know about y'all, but I think all 3 of us are teaching in some way or the other. But I'm teaching on Wednesday nights, really coming off of the Bible conference. And so Don Mills and I are going to teach basically what the Bible conference is on. We're going to teach Male and Female, He Created Them by Denny Burke, and really go deeper into the subject of male biblical manhood and biblical womanhood. And so I'm excited about maybe stirring some fires with the Bible conference, and then people will come and join us for that conference on Wednesday nights, so that open class.
And I know from the content of that a lot of what you guys are going to be talking about is really practical. We've got a lot of people with a lot of challenges in the area of human sexuality now, and gender, and family members and coworkers and their work situation or their challenges on a college campus and all those things. How do you respond? How do you answer? What do you do as a Christian? So I know you guys will be hitting a lot of practical things on that one. One of the class that I'm going to be teaching primarily starting in March will be on Wednesday nights, our midweek. And this one grew out of questions during our systematic theology. So in systematic theology, we spend a few weeks on soteriology, the doctrine of salvation. But there were just so many questions, and we're having to move at such a fast pace that I think it'll be really beneficial to let's spend a little bit more time and let's look at all the beautiful biblical components of our salvation. One, what is it what must I do to be saved? And what does our salvation look like and all that it entails? And so, you needn't worry that this would be an indoctrination. I'm not trying to drag people kicking and screaming into a philosophy they don't understand or embrace, but a thorough biblical understanding of our great salvation. So that's soteriology. When you read that, what does that mean? Doctrine of salvation. So I'll be teaching that with Pastor Dan here and one of our elders, Eric Dunnup.
And then, of course, the one none of us can speak to because it's the women's class. We also have another women's Bible study on Wednesday night. So that's the 3 Wednesday nights. Is that right, Dan?
There's one other. John Stickles, our
Sorry,
resident philosopher,
He's going to kill me.
is teaching Consequences of Ideas, and that's a book by R.C. Sproul. He'll talk about the ideas that shape the church and Western culture and our worldviews today.
Yeah,
so.
and I know there's a lot to choose from, and you may be feeling like, how do I pick from those? But all those are good options. The women's Bible study has been just really, really beneficial. Great feedback from the last one of those. Consequence of Ideas, powerful book by R.C. Sproul, and John will do a great idea of exploring those things of what is behind the scenes, behind the surface on so many different worldviews and values that we hold. And I think the human sexuality, man, we've got to deal with this. We've got to have a right understanding. And for those of you who want to dig into that theology a little bit more, I'll be doing soteriology. Now for mine, I will be recording it. So if you're in a different life group, I don't want to gut my group out. I may find the first week no one's there because they know it's being recorded, but I will be recording that one so you can share it. Sunday mornings, we'll be doing a slightly new version of our membership. Daniel, talk about that. Meaningful membership.
Whereas our membership used to be 4 classes, we're going to convert it to 3 classes. So now's a great time to jump on that if you haven't done it yet. So class 1 will be basically what we teach as a church. Pastor Paul will teach that class, and we'll go through the New Hampshire Confession of Faith and talk about what we teach as a church. And then in class 2, Charles will be teaching that class on our church covenant and also briefly just answer the question, why join a church? Then our 3rd class will be basically what do we do as Calvary Baptist Church, and that's where kind of our discipleship strategy comes into play. And just basically, if you're a member of Calvary, what is it that you do? And do you want to talk about May? What was that on that?
We got 2 more on Sunday mornings. How to grow.
Yeah.
So if you're a new Christian, or if you feel like you're in just a stagnant place spiritually, and you want to jumpstart your spiritual life, spiritual growth is not a magic formula. It's about discipline. And it's about commitments, about habits. And so there'll be a class led by John Adams Uptain, and Dan will be involved in that one too, helping people just, what does it look like to grow? How do I make a plan for personal spiritual growth? And then Tommy Perry, who's responsible for our missions coordination and missions planning and over our missions efforts. Tommy, this one's new, Charles. You can speak to this one at what we're doing with this new missions class and why this one is really important.
Yeah, many years ago, I guess probably now, maybe 10 years ago, maybe not that much, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, we did a missions class, and we asked every member who was going to go on a mission trip to come to a 2-parter, 2 different Sundays, and we did a missions class to just, because we reset what we thought of as missions at Calvary. That was led by the missions committee, and so we taught that for a few times, and then of course over the time we've kind of gotten away from a teaching towards training our missionaries, and so this really is going back to that model of how do we all believe, what do we all believe about missions, and what do we believe about short-term missions especially. So anybody that's going to go on a trip this year or look at a trip in the future, this would kind of be our Missions 101 class, and I think it's going to be a rich look at missions, but it's not going to be, just everything about biblical as in, the theology of missions. It's not that. It's more practical for us. It's going to have things like, hey, you need a passport, details like those kind of things that Tommy's going to hit of mission life and missionaries, but also helping us have a wider view of what we need to see in our point or our part of missions around the world.
Yeah, what every short-term mission project and really what every local partnership has in common, because we're ultimately about the same things. We talk about that in membership class, that Calvary has 2 primary obvious emphases, sort of the effects of what we're about. And those 2, I always tell people, if you want to think of 2 things that would describe us, I hope you'll think of at least these 2. You'll think of discipleship and missions. But the distinction between the 2 really sometimes is just location and venue, because what we're doing in missions ultimately is to make disciples. And so how we partner with people, who we partner with. And again, the mission trips are different, but there are ultimate aims in all of them. We want you to know that is and be tied into those things. So that's kind of a picture of what's coming up soon. And so I hope you'll explore these things. You'll hear us talk about these a little bit more on Sunday morning and find some more information on the website. But I hope you'll avail yourself of some of these good opportunities for training, for development. One other thing I was going to say, Charles, is that a learning pyramid you got in front of you?
Yes, it is.
All right. This is, I just saw that piece of paper. Hey, circling back to this, Dan, because this is a question that someone had about the open class model. You look at one of those classic learning pyramids, and it says something like, I don't know, what's it say at the top? You remember 5% of what you hear?
10% of what they read is what you remember. 20% of what you hear is what you remember. So just that's the top 30 for those two. Okay, so the challenge to the open class would be, okay, I'm sitting there in a lecture, and you got somebody like Paul's teaching on systematic theology, the doctrine of sin or something. I'm not going to remember all this, 30% at best. But here's where that learning pyramid actually comes into play a little bit in our open classes. One, we do facilitate questions. Sometimes those questions happen in the class, and so we're addressing, does this make sense? Do you understand this? Let's talk that. And that discussion, I think, maybe moves us a little farther down the pyramid. But the unseen part, sort of beneath the waterline part, is our open classes almost invariably are generating good conversations and discussions afterwards. And so many follow-up conversations, follow-up meetings, following up, those sort of things. I think some real learning is happening where people are now starting to engage other things. They're discussing. And Charles, one of the things we talked about in systematic theology, for instance, which I've said that word a lot in this podcast, but what might seem dry or just theoretical to people is we were really intentional at saying, okay, what do I do with this week? How do I live this? How do I apply this? How do I tell this, and who do I tell it to? And so there's more there than just you just come and sit and listen. We want this to affect how you think and how you respond and how you live. And so all of our open classes are not just theoretical; they're all practical. So I'll throw that last. Well, and I'd say to that, Paul, one thing that we've really been saying on staff and elders recently is that we want to be a training center. We want to be training disciples, and with that, the training aspect of it, I think every open class should have a component of it that asks the person to take whatever they've just heard and now give it to somebody else. Maybe it's through an application, maybe it's through an actual conversation, or there's something that comes out of that. And I think that's where you get down that pyramid, is when you're now the teacher in some way to the next person.
Yeah, we're trying to make, Dan, that goes right back to our core philosophies that we've held for years. We want to make disciples who are equipped and encouraged and motivated to make disciples.
Yeah, you didn't let me answer the question of what I would say to somebody who said,
"Oh, please,
we killed their life group."
You killed my life group with these open classes.
What I would say to that is, and I think Dan answered it in a way of saying, your life group doesn't have to be 20 people to think that it's died. You know what I'm saying? So if you now have 6 to 8 coming, then that's a good sized group for you to have a life group with. And so I hope our teachers see that we have the mentality that bigger is better, and that attendance is what matters. That's just how we have done things for generations. It seems like in church life, at least my church life. And so the more you get here, the more number we can have, the better. But sometimes, like Dan said, those smaller groups, those where you can really do life on life together, maybe there is just 8 people, 4 couples in your class now, but man, the discussion you can have, how you can live life together, those things are so much better.
Accountability.
And I would even say to some of our life groups that have been together forever, especially I talked to one of the life group leaders about this, because when we started open classes, he was really concerned because he was like, man, I've been with my group for 20-something years, and we know each other so well. I would say to you then, I would challenge you that I don't think that 1 hour on Sunday morning is going to change those relationships. And our life groups have done a good job of living life together, missing that 1 hour a week for 12 weeks or doing it some other time or less, if you've been together that long, you're going to still have those relationships. I mean, this past Sunday night, I went to my life group, of course, stopped because I started teaching open classes. I went to our Super Bowl get-together, was back with 3 different families that were in my life group. It didn't have to us meet on a weekly occasion for us to still keep contact with one another. No, we've just done that through D groups. We've done it through all kinds of different ways to still keep in contact with people. So I hope our church family can see that, and that I've actually been able to now be in a room with other people that I would never be in a room before with if I stayed in my life group the whole time and kept teaching that same group over and over every week.
Well, we hope we've given you some things to think about and an encouragement to participate. If you've been in some open classes already, consider what's coming up here in this next quarter. If you're ready to get back in your life group full swing, your D group, and you're going to take a break from those open classes, that's fine too. That's, you got to make those choices. If you haven't been in an open class because you haven't been clear, hasn't been clear to you, or you haven't been sure how it works or its benefit for you, I hope this answers some of those questions. So Dan will give you the final parting shot today.
I just want to, if there's life group leaders listening or open class teachers listening, I just want to thank you for your service. I want to read Colossians 3:23 and 24, which says, "Whatever you do, work heartily, ask for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ." And so I encourage life group leaders, open class teachers, press on, knowing that you'll receive your reward.
As always, we are for God and for Dothan and for the world.